That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun crested the jagged horizon of the Nevada desert, casting long shadows across the sprawling expanse of Fort Echo. Dust devils swirled lazily in the pre-dawn chill, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and gun oil. At 0500 hours, the base hummed with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Boots struck the packed earth in unison as platoons formed up for morning PT, their cadence calls echoing off the low barracks. Overhead, the distant thump of a Black Hawk's rotors tested the air, a reminder that even in training, vigilance never slept. Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at the edge of the K9 compound, her posture ramrod straight in her camouflage utilities. At 32, she was a veteran handler with 8 years in the Army's military working dog program, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun beneath her patrol cap. Her uniform bore the patches of the 101st Airborne Division, earned through deployments that had left faint scars on her forearms, reminders of IEDs sniffed out in the sands of Afghanistan. But it was her partner who defined her world. Rex, a 7-year-old Belgian Malinois with a coat like burnished copper and eyes that missed nothing. Rex sat at her heel, alert but composed, his ears pricked toward the compound's chain-link fence. The K9 unit was a tight-knit operation, a dozen handlers and their dogs rotating through detection drills, patrol exercises, and the occasional VIP escort. Here, rank mattered, but so did the unspoken bond between human and K9, forged in sweat, commands, and the quiet hours of grooming after a long shift. Elena's hand rested lightly on Rex's harness, feeling the steady rise and fall of his flanks. "Steady, boy," she murmured, her voice low and even. He leaned into her touch, a subtle acknowledgement that spoke volumes. The morning briefing unfolded in the operations tent, its canvas walls fluttering in the rising wind. Captain Harlan Reed, the unit commander, paced before a whiteboard scrawled with the day's schedule. Explosives detection runs, obedience trials, and a joint exercise with the EOD team. Reed was a broad-shouldered officer in his 40s, his face etched with the lines of too many field reports. "Listen up," he said, his tone clipped and authoritative. "We're ramping up for the quarterly certification. No room for errors. Vasquez, your team's on point for the perimeter sweep at 0700. Keep it tight." Elena nodded crisply. "Yes, sir." Beside her, Staff Sergeant Malik Torres, her squad leader, shot her a quick glance of approval. The chain of command was ironclad here. Orders flowed down, compliance flowed up. Questioning wasn't protocol, it was a breach. But Elena had learned to read the undercurrents, the way a dog's hackles rose before a handler sensed trouble. The flicker of doubt in a superior's eyes during a debrief. As the group dispersed, Elena led Rex to the training field, a vast stretch of barren ground dotted with mock obstacles, barriers, vehicles, and buried scent tubes simulating threats. The air grew warmer, the sun baking the earth into a haze that distorted the distant mountains. Other handlers arrived with their dogs. Luna, a sleek German shepherd, Bolt, a wiry Labrador. They worked in pairs, issuing commands in sharp bursts. "Such" for search, "Aus" for release. Rex moved like an extension of Elena's will, his nose working the ground with methodical intensity, tail low and focused. By 0630, the perimeter sweep began. The base's outer fence line abutted a rugged stretch of desert, where coyotes howled at night and the wind carried echoes of live fire ranges miles away. Eleanor and Rex took the eastern sector, flanked by 2 privates from the security detail. Radio chatter crackled in her earpiece. "All clear on Sector 2, moving to 3. Routine, predictable." But as they approached a cluster of maintenance sheds, Rex stiffened. His body went rigid, paws planted. a low rumble building in his throat, not a bark, but a warning growl that Elena knew too well. She halted, scanning the area. The sheds were standard issue, padlocked and weathered, used for storing spare parts and fuel cans. Nothing out of place. "Rex! Platz!" she commanded softly, urging him to down. But he didn't comply. Instead, he strained forward, nose twitching, eyes locked on a seam in the fence where barbed wire sagged slightly. Elena's pulse quickened. Rex wasn't trained for theatrics. His alerts were gold standard, calibrated through hundreds of hours in controlled environments and real-world ops. "Handler Vasquez, status?" Torres's voice cut through the radio, laced with impatience. "Stand by, Sergeant," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. She approached the fence, Rex at her side, his growls escalating to a series of sharp huffs. The air smelled of dry metal and something acrid. Fuel? No, sharper. Explosives. Her training kicked in. C4 residue, perhaps, or a trace from a distant blast. But this was a secure base. Threats were simulated, not real. Elena keyed her radio. "Sergeant, Rex is alerting hard on the eastern fence line. Near the sheds. Possible scent hit. Recommend EOD sweep." A pause, then laughter crackled over the channel. Not just Torres, but half the squad joining in. "Vasquez, you serious? We're in the middle of a drill, not a hot zone. Rex probably caught a whiff of the mess hall chili from last night." More chuckles, echoing from the other handlers. One private nearby snorted, shaking his head. "Dogs get false positives too, Sarge. Tell her to heal him and move on." Elena's jaw tightened, but she held her position. The chain of command demanded respect, yet her conscience, honed by years of relying on Rex's instincts, screamed otherwise. He'd saved her life twice overseas. Ignoring him now felt like betrayal. "Sergeant, with respect, Rex doesn't false alert. This is protocol. We need to clear it." Torres's response was sharper now, the amusement fading into irritation. "Negative, Vasquez. Resume the sweep. That's an order. Don't waste resources on a glitch." She hesitated, the desert wind whipping sand against her boots. Rex pressed against her leg, whining softly, a sound reserved for true threats. Around them, the base stirred, trucks rumbling to life. Soldiers jogging in formation. No one else noticed the anomaly. To push back meant risking her eval, her standing in the unit. But to walk away? That violated everything she stood for, the loyalty that bound her to Rex, the duty to protect the men and women who counted on them. "Copy that," she said finally, voice steady despite the knot in her gut. But as she turned to lead Rex away, he lunged once more, barking furiously, a rare breach of his training. The sound cut through the morning like a siren. Then, without warning, the first alarm pierced the air. A low wail from the central tower, followed by a cascade, klaxons blaring across the base, red lights flashing on every rooftop. Soldiers froze mid-step, radios erupting in urgent calls. "All personnel to stations. Perimeter breach. Repeat, perimeter breach." Elena's blood ran cold. Rex had been right. And in that instant, the laughter died, replaced by the thunder of boots as the base mobilized. Too late to ignore what her warning had tried to prevent. The klaxons wailed on, a relentless pulse that drowned out the desert wind and sent birds scattering from the sparse creosote bushes. Fort Echo transformed in seconds from a place of ordered routine to a fortress on edge. Soldiers burst from barracks, rifles slung over shoulders, faces set in the grim focus of drilled response. Trucks revved to life on the motor pool, their tires kicking up gravel as security teams mobilized. Overhead, the Blackhawk's rotors accelerated from test hum to urgent throb, lifting off toward the eastern fence line. Elena dropped to one knee beside Rex, her hand firm on his collar to steady him amid the frenzy. "Aus, boy! Good hold!" His barking ceased at her command, but his body remained taut, muscles coiled like a spring. The acrid scent lingered in her nostrils, definitely not chilly, but something volatile, man-made. She scanned the fence again, the sagging barbed wire now silhouetted against the rising sun. No visible breach, yet the alarms screamed perimeter violation. Her radio crackled with overlapping voices. Tower confirms motion sensors tripped. Sector East. All units converge. Captain Reed's voice cut through the static, authoritative and unyielding. Vasquez, report your position. Torres, get your squad locked down. EOD en route. Do not approach the site. Eleanor keyed her mic, keeping her response crisp. Sergeant Vasquez and Rex at Eastern Sheds, sir. Alert confirmed prior to breach. Standing by for clearance. She felt the weight of eyes on her now, not mocking, but probing. The two privates from security flanked her, their postures shifting from skepticism to alert readiness, rifles at low ready. Torres arrived first, his Humvee skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust. He dismounted with 3 other handlers, their dogs pacing restlessly on short leashes. The staff sergeant's face was flushed, the earlier laughter erased by the reality unfolding. Vasquez, he said, voice low but edged with tension as he approached. Walk me through it. Exact sequence. Elena rose, gesturing to the fence without touching it. Rex, alerted at 628, hard behavioral change, growl to huff to bark. Scent trace, probable explosive residue. I called it in. You cleared us to move on. She met his gaze evenly. No accusation, just facts. Protocol demanded debriefs like this, precise, unemotional. Torres nodded curtly, rubbing his jaw. Understood. Hold position. He turned to his radio, coordinating with the incoming EOD team. Luna and Bolt, the other dogs, were worked forward under their handlers' commands, noses to the ground. Luna sat abruptly near the same seam, a clear alert. Bolt whined, pawing the earth. The confirmation rippled through the group, a silent validation that eased the knot in Elena's chest, but didn't erase the sting of dismissal. Rex leaned against her leg, his warmth a grounding force amid the chaos. The EOD convoy rolled up minutes later. 2 armored trucks, technicians in bulky suits emerging like shadows from the vehicles. Their leader, a wiry lieutenant named Hayes, clipped a dosimeter to his vest and approached Torres. What's the play here? Hayes asked, eyes flicking to the dogs. Torres pointed to Elena. Handler Vasquez's K9 flagged it first. Multiple alerts now. Hayes nodded, pulling on gloves. Smart work. We'll sweep the perimeter. Could be a probe, drone drop, or sabotage. Base intel's lighting up. Possible insider chatter from off-post. Elena watched as the team deployed, robots trundling forward on treads, sensors whirring softly against the alarm's din. The air thickened with the scent of exhaust and tension, soldiers forming a loose cordon 50 meters back. Reed arrived on foot, striding from the ops tent with his XO in tow, notebook in hand. He stopped before Eleanor, his expression a mask of professional assessment. Sergeant, at ease. Your report, detailed. She recounted it again, word for word, Rex sitting motionless at her side. The captain listened without interruption, then glanced at the fence. You pushed back on the order to proceed? Yes, sir. Respectfully. Rex's track record is clean. 0 false positives in certification. Reed's eyes narrowed slightly, weighing her words against the chain of command sanctity. Noted, but orders stand for a reason. We'll debrief this in full after containment. There was no praise, no apology, just the cold machinery of procedure grinding forward. Elena saluted sharply, her conscience warring with the discipline ingrained in her. Loyalty to Rex had nearly cost her. Obedience might have cost the base. As the EOD team worked, the alarms cycled down to intermittent pulses, the all-clear holding in abeyance. Radios buzzed with updates. No active device found, but residue traces confirmed. RDX particles consistent with plastic explosives. A breach in the wire, subtle, likely cut overnight. The base's threat level elevated to yellow, patrols doubled, and a full lockdown initiated for non-essential personnel. Elena and Rex were pulled back to the K9 staging area, a shaded corral near the compound, where handlers cooled down their partners with water bowls and gentle brushes. She knelt to unclip Rex's harness, running her fingers through his fur, still damp with morning dew. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered, his head nudging her palm in response. The bond was wordless, built on cues and trust, his nose detecting what human tech sometimes missed, her commands guiding him through peril. But now, whispers circulated among the handlers. Vasquez's dog saved the day, or was it overreach? Torres approached as she worked, his posture less rigid. "Look, Elena, off record. Good call sticking to your gut. But Reed's old school. He'll want this squared in the after-action." She nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. The sun climbed higher, baking the ground into radiating heat. "Understood, Sergeant. Just doing my job." Yet inside, the moral fault line widened. The incident wasn't just a breach. It exposed cracks in the system, dismissed alerts, resource strains, the human error of doubt. If she'd walked away, the residue might have gone unnoticed until too late, but defying the order, even verbally, invited scrutiny. Her next eval loomed, a potential blemish on her record. By midday, the base settled into heightened routine, extra sweeps, dog teams rotated to inner perimeters, briefings laced with urgency. Elena led Rex through a cool-down walk, the crunch of gravel under their boots a steady rhythm. Distant, the EOD trucks departed, but the air hummed with unresolved questions. Intel suggested no immediate threat, yet the laughter from earlier echoed in her mind, a reminder that conscience often walked alone until proven right. In the ops tent that afternoon, Reed gathered the unit for a preliminary review. Charts on the whiteboard marked the breach site, timelines sketched in dry erase ink. "This was no drill," he stated flatly. "Vasquez's team gets credit for the flag, but we review protocols. No one operates solo." Elena stood at attention, Rex's lead in hand, feeling the ripple of her choice extend beyond the fence, toward tribunals, reforms, or quiet vindication. The desert wind picked up again, carrying the faint whine of another Black Hawk as the weight of duty settled heavier on her shoulders. The ops tent's canvas walls strained against the afternoon gusts, the scent of chalk dust and stale coffee mingling with the ever-present tang of desert air seeping through the flaps. Captain Reed stood at the head of the folding table, his marker pausing mid-stroke on the whiteboard as he outlined the breach timeline. The unit, handlers, techs, and a scattering of security personnel sat on metal chairs or stood in loose formation, postures rigid under the fluorescent hum. Elena remained at the back with Rex at her heel, his presence a silent anchor amid the scrutiny. The captain's voice carried the weight of command, measured and unyielding. Residue confirmed, RDX traces consistent with external tampering. No device recovered, but the cut wire suggests reconnaissance. Intel's running traces on perimeter cams. Expect a full lockdown through 1800. Murmurs rippled through the group, quickly quelled by Reed's raised hand. Staff Sergeant Torres leaned against a support pole, his arms crossed, eyes flicking occasionally to Elena. The earlier dismissal hung unspoken, a shadow over the room. "Vasquez," Reed continued, turning to her directly. "Your alert initiated response. Detail the sequence again for the record." She stepped forward, saluting before speaking. "Sir, at 0628 hours, Rex exhibited behavioral indicators, stiffening, growling, non-compliance to down command. Scent work confirmed explosive residue. I reported to Sergeant Torres. He directed continuation of the sweep." Her words were precise, stripped of emotion, as protocol demanded. Rex sat motionless, his ears attuned to the room's subtle shifts, the scrape of a boot, the rustle of notes. Reed nodded, jotting a note. "And your objection?" The question landed like a probe, drawing eyes from across the tent. Elena met his gaze steadily. "I express concern per training guidelines, sir. Handlers are trained to trust canine alerts in potential threat scenarios." A beat of silence followed, broken only by the distant crackle of a radio outside. Torres shifted, clearing his throat. "Captain, for clarity, the context was a routine drill. Resources were allocated elsewhere, no indication of real-time threat." Reed's expression remained neutral, but Elena caught the flicker in his eyes, the calculus of chain of command versus emerging evidence. The debrief stretched into the late afternoon, evolving from review to formal inquiry. An investigator from Base JAG arrived unannounced, a lean major named Ellis, briefcase in hand and recorder at the ready. He sat up at the table's end, the click of his device amplifying the tense tension. "This will be recorded for the incident report," Ellis stated, his tone procedural, like reading from a manual. "All statements under oath. Sergeant Vasquez, you'll start." Elena recounted the morning once more, her voice even as she described Rex's cues. The huff of his breath, the press of his body against the fence. Ellis interrupted sparingly, clarifying timestamps and radio logs. When he turned to Torres, the sergeant's response was defensive but factual. Order given based on operational tempo, no malice. Hindsight's clear now. As the questioning circled, the public nature of the reckoning unfolded. Word had spread through the base like radio chatter, handlers whispering in the chow line, security teams trading accounts during shift changes. By evening, when the lockdown lifted partially, Elena led Rex back to the K9 kennels under a sky streaked with fading light. The compound's floodlights buzzed to life, casting long shadows over the runs where dogs paced or rested. Other handlers nodded as she passed, a mix of respect and wariness in their greetings. "Heard Rex called it," one said, brushing down his shepherd. "Saved us a headache." Elena managed a tight smile. Team effort. But inside, the exposure gnawed. The incident report would circulate up the chain, potentially marking her as the handler who questioned an order. Dinner in the mess hall brought the scrutiny into sharper focus. The air smelled of reheated MREs and industrial cleaner, trays clattering as soldiers queued. Elena sat with her squad at a corner table, Rex curled underfoot on the concrete floor, his head on her boot. Torres joined them, plate in hand, his usual banter subdued. "Jag's thorough," he said quietly, forking at his rations. "Reed's pushing for a quick close. Praise the dog. Reinforce protocols." Elena nodded, sipping water from her canteen. "Understood, Sergeant." But across the hall, a cluster of EOD techs glanced their way, one mimicking a dog's alert with exaggerated sniffs before laughing it off. The mockery was lighter now, laced with reluctant admission, yet it stung, a reminder that her defiance had pierced the unit's veil of unquestioned obedience. Night fell with the precision of base routine. 2100 lights out for most, but the K9 team rotated to overnight watch. Elena and Rex patrolled the inner perimeter, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the dark. The desert cooled rapidly, stars pricking the vast sky like distant tracers. Radio checks punctuated the silence, all sectors nominal. Yet Eleanor's mind replayed the day's ripples. The investigator's recorder capturing her words, Reed's measured praise tempered by protocol reminders. Her conscience, vindicated by the alarms, now faced institutional judgment. A formal inquiry could blemish her record, delay promotions, or worse, question Rex's certification if spun as overreach. At Oro 200, during a routine sniff of the motor pool, Rex alerted again, this time on a parked Humvee's undercarriage. Elena radioed it in immediately, her voice steady. "Possible trace, Sector Bravo. Request EOD." No laughter this time. The response was swift, a team dispatched within minutes. The sweep found nothing but residual dust, yet the incident logged another entry in the growing report. Back at the kennel, as she settled Rex with a blanket and fresh water, Eleanor felt the weight of eyes, even in solitude. The base's hierarchy demanded accountability, not just for the breach, but for the fracture her choice exposed. Dawn approached with the first hints of grey, the air crisp against her skin as she reviewed her duty log by headlamp. Torres's voice came over the radio for early relief. "Vasquez, stand down. Briefing at 0600, JAG wrap-up." She acknowledged, clipping Rex's lead for the handoff. The moral tension lingered, a quiet storm. Her loyalty to him had triggered alarms that saved the base. But obedience's breach invited reckoning. In the chain of command's unyielding structure, integrity was a double-edged blade, honored in retrospect, punished in the moment. As the sun edged over the horizon, painting the barracks in gold, Elena pondered the legacy unfolding. One handler's stand, backed by a dog's unerring nose, could redefine protocols, mentor the next generation, or simply fade into after-action footnotes. But for now, the tribunal loomed, a test of whether conscience could endure the system's grind. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The morning briefing tent felt smaller under the weight of the assembled officers, its air thick with the scent of fresh brewed coffee and the faint metallic tang of declassified documents. At 0600 sharp, Captain Reed called the unit to order, his voice cutting through the low hum of murmured conversations. Eleanor stood at attention near the front, Rex seated precisely at her left boot, his coat gleaming under the harsh overhead lights. The JAG investigator, Major Ellis, had expanded his presence overnight. Now flanked by 2 aides and a laptop displaying preliminary timelines, he projected an aura of impartial scrutiny that made the room's canvas walls seem to close in. "Sergeant Vasquez," Ellis began, his tone as even as a metronome, "your logged objection to Sergeant Torres's order, elaborate on the rationale. For the record." Elena's gaze remained fixed on a point just above his shoulder, her response measured. "Sir, K9 alerts are primary indicators in threat detection protocols, per FM 319. 17, Rex's behavioral chain, stiffen, vocalize, non-compliance, met all thresholds for a confirmed hit. Proceeding without clearance risked escalation." Rex shifted subtly, his nose twitching toward the scent of ink from Ellis's notepad, but he held position without a sound. The bond between them was a quiet testament. Her words defended not just her actions, but the trust that had saved lives. Torres, positioned to her right, kept his expression neutral, though his fingers drummed lightly against his thigh, a tell Elena recognized from high-stress ops. "Captain, Major," he interjected when prompted, "the order aligned with operational priorities. Drills don't accommodate every alert. False positives strain resources. No intent to undermine." Reed nodded, flipping through a stack of radio transcripts, the paper rustling like dry leaves. The captain's face betrayed no favoritism, but Elena sensed the undercurrent. This was no simple breach review. Whispers from base command suggested higher scrutiny. Fort Echo's proximity to testing ranges made any incursion a potential national security flag, drawing eyes from Division HQ. As the questioning deepened, the reckoning spilled beyond the tent's confines. By 800, the unit dispersed to heightened duties, but the incident's visibility grew like ripples in a pond. Security patrols doubled along the eastern fence, where razor wire gleamed freshly reinforced under the climbing sun. Elena and Rex were assigned to a joint sweep with EOD, their Humvee bouncing over rutted trails as the desert heat baked the vehicle's metal frame. Inside, Lieutenant Hayes from the bomb squad reviewed the residue analysis on a tablet, the screen's glow harsh against his fatigue-lined face. "RDX particles match commercial-grade demo packs," he said, passing the device to Eleanor. Not military issue. Could be poachers testing fences or worse, a dry run. Your dog's nose caught what our sensors missed by hours. The validation landed softly, a balm against the morning's probe, yet it amplified the exposure. At the sweep site, a cluster of engineers paused their welding to watch Rex work, nose to ground, methodically quartering the earth near the repaired seam. One tech, a young specialist with grease-streaked sleeves, approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, that Malinois, he's the real hero, huh? Heard the alarms were all because of him." Eleanor kept her focus on Rex, issuing a soft "such" to redirect him. "Team effort. Specialist. Protocol got us here." But the words spread over lunch radios in the motor pool, transforming her quiet defiance into base lore. Handlers in the chow line nodded her way, their earlier skepticism replaced by a grudging respect that bordered on curiosity. Afternoon brought the institutional response into full view. A formal tribunal convened in the base's administration building, a squat concrete structure cooled by industrial fans that whirred like distant rotors. Elena reported at 1400, Rex's lead clipped short for the sterile hallway. Inside the hearing room, a panel of three, Reed presiding, flanked by Ellis and a colonel from operations, sat behind a polished oak table. The air smelled of polished wood and authority, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Witnesses filed in, the two privates from security, their statements confirming Rex's alert and the squad's initial dismissal. "We laughed it off, sir," one admitted, voice steady but eyes downcast. "Thought it was drill jitters. Should have trusted the dog." Torres testified next, his uniform crisp, posture impeccable. "My order was to maintain tempo, Colonel. In hindsight, a secondary check would have mitigated. Sergeant Vasquez's persistence flagged it. Commendable, within bounds." The concession was tactical, easing the tension, but Elena felt the scrutiny like a spotlight. When her turn came, she stood before the panel, detailing the moment. The wind's whisper against the fence, Rex's insistent press, the radio's crackle carrying laughter that clashed with her gut. "Duty requires obedience, sirs, but conscience demands verification when lives hang on it. Rex doesn't err. Ignoring him endangers the unit." The colonel leaned forward, his silver eagles glinting. "And the chain of command, Sergeant? You questioned a direct order." Elena's response was immediate, laced with the restraint of her training. "Respectfully, sir, I reported and held position until cleared. No disobedience, only diligence." Rex, sensing the shift, leaned into her leg, a subtle brace that steadied her. The panel deliberated in low tones, the clock on the wall ticking like a countdown. Outside, boots echoed in the corridor, soldiers on shift change, oblivious to the drama unfolding within. By dusk, the tribunal recessed, Reed pulling Elena aside in the hallway's dim light. Shadows stretched long across the linoleum, the scent of rain-damp earth drifting from an open door. "You're walking a line, Vasquez," he said quietly, his voice carrying the gravel of experience. "JAG's recommending a protocol audit. Your alert's the catalyst. Good instinct, but it exposes gaps. Torres takes heat for the dismissal. You, for the pushback." She saluted, holding his gaze. "Understood, sir. Whatever reforms come, Rex and I are ready." He nodded, a flicker of approval breaking through the discipline. As night settled over Fort Echo, the base's lights flickered on like stars grounded in concrete. Elena walked Rex through the cooling compound, the gravel crunching underfoot, his harness cool against her palm. The tribunal's echoes lingered, the witnesses' admissions, the panel's probing questions, turning private doubt into public record. Her choice had ignited not just alarms, but a chain reaction. Memos circulating to adjacent bases, handlers drilling on alert protocols, even a nod from Division Command praising K9 integration. Yet the cost pressed in. Torres's sidelong glances carried unease, and her eval packet now bore the mark of controversy. In the kennel, under the soft glow of a single bulb, Elena brushed Rex's coat, the bristles whispering through fur still warm from the day's exertions. "We held the line, boy," she murmured, his eyes meeting hers in unwavering trust. The moral tension coiled tighter, vindicated yet vulnerable, her integrity a spark that could reform the system or consume her place within it. Distant, the perimeter lights hummed, guardians against the dark, as the weight of consequence settled like desert dust on her shoulders. Tomorrow's briefings would demand more, testimony refined, lessons codified. But for now, in the quiet bond with her partner, Elena found the resolve to face it, the quiet courage that defined them both. The kennel's quiet was a fragile sanctuary, broken only by the soft rhythm of Elena's brush through Rex's fur and the distant hum of generators powering the base through the night. Moonlight filtered through the chain-link runs, casting grid-like shadows on the concrete floor, where puddles from an earlier hose-down gleamed like polished obsidian. Elena's hands moved methodically, removing the day's grit, sand from the sweeps, traces of sweat from Rex's exertions. His eyes, half-lidded in contentment, tracked her every motion, a silent affirmation of their shared vigilance. The tribunal's weight lingered in her chest, not as defeat, but as a pivot. Her stand had elevated a routine breach into a case study, one that could reshape how the unit weighed canine instincts against human command. Dawn broke with the precision of reveille, the bugle's call slicing through the chill air at 05:30. Elena rose from her cot in the handler's barracks, the thin mattress creaking under her shift. She clipped Rex's lead, their morning routine unfolding like clockwork. A quick circuit of the compound, his nose testing the wind for any overnight anomalies, her boots marking steady cadence on the dew-slick gravel. The base stirred around them, trucks idling in the motor pool, the scent of diesel mingling with fresh-baked bread from the mess hall. But today, the air carried an undercurrent of anticipation. Orders had come down overnight for an expanded inquiry, pulling in experts from the Army's working dog program at Lackland. By 0700, the operations center buzzed with unfamiliar faces, a veterinary behaviorist in crisp BDUs, her clipboard clutched like a shield, and a protocol analyst from Division HQ, his laptop whirring through encrypted files. Captain Reed assembled the core team in the briefing room, a reinforced bunker-like space with walls lined in tactical maps and the faint echo of ventilation fans. Elena stood at parade rest, Rex beside her, as the group settled. "This escalates," Reed announced, his voice gravelly from the long hours. "JAG's flagging it for systemic review. Vasquez, your testimony yesterday sets the benchmark. Handler's discretion in alert scenarios. We'll simulate the breach today, observe and report." The simulation unfolded on the training field, a cordoned expanse where mock threats were buried under controlled conditions. The sun climbed, baking the earth into radiating waves that distorted the horizon. Elena and Rex took their position at the simulated fence line, joined by Torres and two junior handlers with their dogs, Luna and Bolt. The behaviorist, Dr. Harlan, a compact woman with wire-rimmed glasses, circled them, stopwatch in hand. "Run the sequence as it occurred," she directed. "Note every cue, verbal, non-verbal, canine response." Elena nodded, issuing the first command, "Such." Rex moved forward, his form low and purposeful, nose skimming the ground until he reached the planted scent tube, RDX residue, calibrated to mimic the real trace. He alerted cleanly, body rigid, a low huff escaping his muzzle, refusal to advance on her down signal. Elena radioed it in, mirroring the morning's exchange. "Alert confirmed, Sergeant. Recommend hold." Torres, playing his role, responded over the simulated channel, "Negative, proceed." The tension mirrored reality, the junior handlers exchanging glances, Luna beginning to whine in sympathy, but this time Eleanor held, citing protocol verbatim. Per FM 31917, Section 42, persistent alerts warrant secondary verification. Dr. Harlan jotted notes furiously, her pen scratching like claws on the notepad. Good. Now, escalate. What if the order repeats? Torres cleared his throat, sweat beading on his brow under the relentless sun. Understood, but tempo dictates movement. The simulation ground on, Rex's persistence unyielding until the behaviorist called time. The group debriefed in the shade of a camouflaged awning, water bottles passed hand to hand, the metallic tang of hydration packs cutting the dust. "Your bond's exemplary," Dr. Harlan told Elena, kneeling to examine Rex's pause for stress indicators. "No signs of overtraining. This isn't handler error, it's a protocol gap. Dismissing alerts erodes trust, invites real breaches." Torres nodded slowly, his earlier defensiveness softening into reflection. "Point taken, Doc. We train for obedience, but dogs don't read memos." The public reckoning intensified that afternoon, as the simulation's footage circulated through secure channels. By 1400, Elena found herself in the base theatre, a multi-purpose hall with rows of folding chairs and a projector screen flickering to life. For a unit-wide briefing, over 100 personnel filed in, infantry from adjacent platoons, EOD techs, even admin clerks whose routines had been upended by the lockdown. Reed took the podium, the room's air conditioner humming against the heat seeping through the vents. "This incident tests us all," he began, cueing the video. The screen showed Rex's alert in stark clarity, his focused intensity, Elena's measured report, the radio's crackle of doubt. Gasps rippled through the audience as the simulated alarms played, a digital echo of the real chaos. Questions followed, the microphone passed like a hot potato. A young private from security stood first. "Ma'am, how do you know when to push back? Chain of commands drilled into us." Elena rose, Rex at her side, her voice steady amid the spotlight's glare. "You trust your tools, Private. Rex's saved lives because we listen. Protocol allows reporting. Conscience demands follow-through when it counts." Applause broke unexpectedly, a murmur of solidarity swelling from the handlers' section. Torres, seated nearby, met her eyes with a nod, no words, but an acknowledgement that bridged their divide. As the briefing ended, the institutional gears turned visibly. Reed announced reforms on the spot. Mandatory dual verification for K9 alerts in training, cross-unit drills with EOD, and a mentorship program pairing veterans like Elena with rookies. "Vasquez's actions sparked this," he said, his tone carrying rare warmth. "Not defiance, diligence, it strengthens the whole." Whispers turned to conversations in the exiting crowd. Soldiers clapping her shoulder, one EOD tech murmuring, "Your dog's got better intel than our satellites some days." The validation washed over her, tempered by the knowledge of costs. Her file now flagged for review, Torres facing a formal counseling on command judgment. Evening patrol brought a moment of solitude, Elena and Rex traversing the western perimeter under a sky bruised with twilight. The wind carried the faint scent of creosote, cooler now, as floodlights snapped on one by one. Rex trotted steadily, his harness jingling softly, pausing only to scent a bush where jackrabbits had passed. Elena's hand rested on his head, feeling the warmth of his skull beneath the fur, a tactile reminder of the loyalty that had propelled her forward. The tribunal's shadow receded slightly, replaced by the ripple of change. Memos drafted, training scheduled, her story becoming a cautionary yet inspiring footnote in unit lore. Back at the compound, as she settled Rex for the night, Torres approached unannounced, his silhouette framed by the kennel's gate. "Off the record," he said, voice low against the cricket's chorus. "You were right to hold. pushed me to think harder on the calls. Reforms like this, they stick because of handlers like you. Eleanor met his gaze, the tension between them easing like a knot undone. Team's what matters, Sergeant. Rex just points the way. He saluted informally, turning into the dark, leaving her with the quiet satisfaction of progress. In the bunk that night, the base's hum lulled her towards sleep, the whir of patrols, the distant bark of another dog on watch. Her defiance had weathered the storm, emerging not as rebellion, but as a catalyst. The system, rigid as it was, bent toward justice, her integrity weaving into its fabric. Rex curled at the foot of her cot, his breathing a steady anchor as the first stars wheeled overhead, promising a legacy forged in discipline and unerring trust. The first light of dawn filtered through the barracks' narrow windows, painting the concrete floors in pale stripes as Eleanor stirred from a fitful sleep. Rex lay at the foot of her cot, his flanks rising and falling in the deep rhythm of rest earned through the night's vigil. The base's nocturnal sounds had faded, the low growl of patrols giving way to the sharper calls of reveille echoing across the quadrangle. Elena swung her legs down, boots hitting the floor with a soft thud, and clipped Rex's lead. Their morning routine was unchanged, a measured walk along the compound's edge, his nose sampling the cool air for shifts in the wind, her steps syncing with his unhurried gait. But today, the air held a subtle charge, like static before a storm. Division Command's audit team had arrived overnight, their unmarked SUVs parked discreetly near the ops center. By 0700, the expanded inquiry convened in the base's conference annex, a low-slung building with reinforced doors and the faint hum of secure servers in the walls. Captain Reed stood at the head of the oval table, his uniform impeccable, as the group assembled. Major Ellis from JAG, Dr. Harlan the behaviorist, the protocol analyst from Lackland, and a cluster of handlers including Torres. Elena took her seat, Rex settling at her feet with a quiet sigh, his presence a steady counterpoint to the room's mounting scrutiny. Maps of the breach site projected on a screen behind Reed, annotated with red lines tracing Rex's alert path and the residue dispersal. "Gentlemen, Doctor," Reed began, his voice carrying the clipped efficiency of command, "this review isn't punitive, it's prescriptive. Vasquez's case highlights integration gaps between K9 assets and operational tempo. We adapt or we falter." The analyst, a bespectacled major named Klein, opened with data slides, graphs spiking at alert timestamps overlaid with radio logs and K9 response metrics. "Sergeant Vasquez," he said, directing the beam of his pointer toward her. "Your persistence aligned with field manual thresholds, yet it conflicted with squad-level directives. Quantify the dilemma: obedience versus empirical trust." Elena leaned forward slightly, her hands folded on the table's edge, the wood cool under her palms. "Sir, the manual prioritizes verification for high-confidence alerts. Rex's indicators were textbook: olfactory fixation, vocal suppression, physical resistance. Obedience maintains order. Ignoring validated cues risks the mission. In Afghanistan, that choice saved my platoon from an ambush." Her words hung in the air, factual and restrained, drawing nods from Dr. Harlan. Rex's ear flicked toward the projector, attuned to the room's subtle vibrations. Torres contributed next, his testimony evolving from defense to collaboration. Initial order was tempo-driven, but the simulation exposed blind spots. Dual checks, handler plus EOD ping could standardize without slowing ops. The group murmured agreement, pencils scratching notes on clipboards, the scent of dry erase markers mingling with the annex's recirculated air. Klein projected reform outlines, updated SOPs mandating secondary K9 validations in perimeter drills, cross-training modules for non-K9 personnel on alert queues, and quarterly audits blending human and animal intel. Elena felt the shift, a quiet reform taking root, her stand seeding changes that rippled beyond Fort Echo. Yet the human cost lingered. Her file, now annotated with commendable initiative, carried the undercurrent of scrutiny, a potential hurdle for her next assignment. The session broke for field application, the group moving to the training grounds under a sky clearing to brilliant blue. Dust rose in soft clouds as vehicles formed a convoy, the crunch of tires on gravel underscoring the transition from theory to practice. Elena and Rex led the demo, paired with a rookie handler named Private Ruiz and his young shepherd, Kira. The scenario replicated the breach, a simulated fence line with embedded scent proxies, observers timing responses from shaded bleachers. "Such," Elena commanded, her voice steady as Rex quartered the ground, his paws silent on the packed earth. He alerted at the mark, body coiling in precise tension. Ruiz followed, Kira mirroring the behavior, but hesitating on the hold command, a common rookie gap. Dr. Harlan intervened, stopwatch paused. "See the bond here?" Vasquez cues Rex non-verbally, shoulder tilt, breath rate. "Trust amplifies accuracy." Ruiz nodded, sweat beading on his brow in the rising heat, as Elena demonstrated the debrief, radioing the alert, citing protocol, holding position. "It's not defiance," she explained to him quietly, while the group watched. "It's partnership. Your dog's instincts are your edge. Honor that and the chain adapts." Ruiz's eyes widened slightly, absorbing the lesson. Kira leaning into his leg for reassurance. Torres observed from the sidelines, his posture relaxed for the first time in days, a subtle salute exchanged with Elena as the demo wrapped. By midday, the reforms crystallized in a draft directive, circulated via secure tablets as the team lunched under camouflage netting. The air smelled of field rations, warmed beef stew and electrolyte tabs fizzing in canteens, while Klein outlined implementation, mentorship rotations starting with Elena overseeing rookies, K9 input weighted in after-action reviews, and base-wide seminars on moral thresholds in command. "This case," he said, gesturing to the group, "transforms protocol from rigid to responsive. Vasquez, your input shaped it." The acknowledgement landed without fanfare, but it stirred a quiet pride in Elena's chest, tempered by the vulnerability of exposure. Rex lapped water from a bowl at her feet, oblivious to the accolades, his loyalty the unyielding core. Afternoon brought the legacy's first tangible mark, a unit assembly in the central quadrangle. Ranks formed under the flagpole, where the stars and stripes snapped in the breeze. Over 200 personnel stood at attention, the sun casting sharp shadows across uniforms starched and aligned. Reed took the microphone, his address broadcast over the PA system, voice resonating off the barracks. "Fort Echo's strength lies in vigilance, human and canine. Sergeant Vasquez and Rex exemplify that. Their alert averted escalation. Their example drives change." He detailed the reforms succinctly, enhanced protocols, mentorships, a legacy of integrated trust. Eleanor stood in the front rank, Rex at heel, feeling the collective gaze, not as outlier, but as catalyst. Whispers of approval swept the formation, a private nearby murmuring, "That's how it's done, Sarge." As the assembly dismissed, soldiers approached in ones and twos, EOD techs clasping her forearm in respect, a security lieutenant offering, "Your briefing changed my team's drill calls. Dogs first now." The human connections wove through the discipline, a salute held a beat longer, a handler's nod, carrying shared understanding. Torres fell in step beside her on the walk back, the gravel path winding past humming generators. "Reforms stick because of you," he said, voice low against the wind, "proud to serve with it." Elena returned the nod, the knot of tension easing. "Unit first, Sergeant." Rex just showed the path. Evening settled with a sense of measured transformation, the base's routines infused with new cadence. Elena groomed Rex in the compound's fading light, the brush gliding through his coat. releasing the faint scent of earth and loyalty. The reforms weren't revolution, quiet evolutions in memos and trainings, but they honored the moral courage that had tested her. Her integrity, once a solitary stand, now mentored others, rippling through careers and the institution's core. Distant, a Black Hawk lifted off for evening patrol, its rotors blending with the desert's hush. As Elena pondered, the cost turned gain, conscience fortified, not fractured, in the chain's unyielding embrace. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. The weeks following the inquiry blurred into a cadence of implementation, the base's rhythms adapting like a unit to new orders. Fort Echo's morning briefings now included a dedicated slot for K9 protocol updates, the ops tent filled with the scratch of pens on notepads and the low whir of projectors displaying revised flowcharts. Elena Vasquez moved through it all with the steady gait of routine, her patrol cap shading eyes that had grown sharper from the scrutiny. Rex trotted at her heel during sweeps, his harness jingling softly against the chain-link fences, now reinforced with motion sensors that hummed faintly in the desert wind. The residue traces from the breach had led to arrests off base, poachers with ties to black market suppliers. But the real victory lay in the quiet shifts, handlers no longer dismissing alerts outright, sergeants pausing to cross-check before issuing clears. Captain Reed's reforms took root methodically. The dual verification mandate rolled out first, requiring a secondary human scan or EOD ping for any persistent K9 hit during drills. Elena found herself at the center, tapped to lead the initial training rotations. In the compound's shaded pavilion, under the relentless Nevada sun that baked the metal roofs to a shimmer, she demonstrated to a group of rookies and cross-unit personnel. "Watch the cues," she instructed, her voice even as she unclipped Rex's lead. The air carried the scent of damp fur from a recent rinse and the dry earth kicked up by practicing dogs. Rex quartered the mock perimeter, nose low, until he stiffened at the planted tube, his huff sharp, body planted. "Alert, hold and report. Protocol says verify, not override." The rookies nodded, Private Ruiz among them, Kira at his side now responding with crisper precision after their shared sessions. Torres observed from the sidelines, his arms crossed but his posture open, the earlier friction smoothed by shared accountability. His formal counseling had been brief, a logged reminder on judgment calls, offset by praise for adapting. "You're mentoring well, Vasquez," he said afterward, as the group dispersed to water bowls and leashes. Water sloshed in metal dishes, dogs lapping thirstily while handlers wiped sweat from brows. "Units tighter for it." Elena met his gaze, the knot of resentment long dissolved. "We all learn, Sergeant. Rex just sets the example." Their exchange was brief, mission-focused, but it marked the reform's human layer, trust rebuilt through procedure, not confrontation. The legacy expanded beyond the K9 unit, threading into the base's broader fabric. By month's end, Division HQ disseminated a case study, declassified excerpts of the incident, anonymized but unmistakable in its details. Elena's file reflected it, a commendation for exemplary initiative in threat detection, her eval packet bolstered rather than blemished. Yet the cost lingered in subtler ways. The sidelong glances from old guard officers during chow, the weight of expectation in every patrol. She felt it most during quiet hours, grooming Rex in the kennel after lights out, the single bulb casting warm pools on the concrete. His coat gleamed under her brush, the bristles whispering through fur, still carrying the faint tang of desert sage. "We held true, boy," she murmured, his head tilting into her hand, eyes steady in the dim light. Public scrutiny peaked at the quarterly certification ceremony, held in the central quadrangle, under a sky streaked with contrails from overhead flights. Rows of chairs faced a podium draped in regimental colors, the air crisp with the scent of polished boots and fresh-pressed uniforms. Over 300 personnel assembled, from privates to the base commander, a full bird colonel whose presence amplified the event's gravity. Elena stood in formation with the K9 team, Rex at perfect heel, his ears pricked toward the speakers. Reed took the stage first, his address concise. Certifications test readiness. Today we honor integration, human judgment fused with K9 precision, as proven in recent ops. The words landed without flourish, but Elena felt the ripple, her story, woven into the narrative, symbolizing the shift from rigid obedience to adaptive vigilance. When her name was called, she approached the podium at a measured pace, boots echoing on the platform. The colonel pinned a new ribbon to her chest, a meritorious service award, its metal cool against her uniform. Rex sat motionless beside her, the crowd's gaze shifting between them. "Sergeant Vasquez," the colonel said, voice carrying over the PA, "your actions exemplified moral courage within the chain. This unit and the army learns from such resolve." Applause followed, steady and disciplined, handlers in the ranks clapping with extra vigor. Ruiz caught her eye from the formation, a nod of shared growth passing between them. Torres saluted from his seat, the gesture crisp, a bridge fully crossed. The ceremony's aftermath brought personal reckonings. In the mess hall that evening, trays clinking amid the hum of conversations, soldiers approached her table, EOD techs recounting how the new protocols had flagged a faulty sensor during a live range. A medic praising the emphasis on instinct in high-stress calls. "Your dog's nose changed the playbook," one said. Falk paused mid-air. Elena kept responses brief, deflecting to the team. "Protocol evolves. We all contribute." Rex curled under the table, his warmth against her boot, a grounding reminder of the bond that had sparked it all. The vulnerability of her stand, the fear of reprisal, the isolation of doubt, had forged into strength, her conscience no longer a solitary burden, but a shared legacy. As night deepened, Elena led Rex on their final patrol, the perimeter lights casting golden halos on the wire. The desert wind whispered through the creosote, carrying the distant thump of a helicopter returning from night ops. Reforms were embedding, mentorship sessions scheduled monthly, alerts now logged with dual timestamps, the institution bending without breaking. Elena's transformation was complete, not to hero, but to symbol. A handler whose loyalty to her partner illuminated the moral tightrope of duty. The system, once unyielding, now accommodated conscience, ensuring no alarm would sound unanswered again. In the quiet of the kennel, as Rex settled onto his bed with a contented sigh, Elena reflected on the arc, from laughter in the radio static to this fortified resolve. One act of defiance had rippled into enduring change, proving that within rigid hierarchies, integrity could carve paths of quiet reform. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of They Laughed When She Warned of an Attack, until every alarm on the base went off at once. See you in the next one.